get the chorus in there too.
Yes, we certainly will. Though once he's fed, they won't have much to say.
Yeah, they're already dying down. Yeah, last time we talked about women in the history of art and beauty and harmony.
Yeah.
And the fact that one of the tastes of our time is the lack of harmony.
Yeah, that's true. And our desire not to have things harmonious, our desire for them to be inharmonious, rather than harmonious.
But I think it was the time before that you were talking about how, and something I'd like to talk about, maybe in conjunction with the function of art, is that you feel as though that art is in the process of killing itself.
Well, all of the arts,
Yeah.
all of the arts are committing suicide. Yes, they try to reject what they are, and want to do something else. And I think, of course, Merce Cunningham is a great example of that. I heard him say one time that he had an ideal of what dance that he wanted to put on, which would be danced entirely behind the curtain, and all you could see was occasionally the curtain would be lowered within about a foot of the floor of the stage. And so the dance would be going on, but you'd never see it. You see glimpses of the feet once in a while. And this is a genuine repudiation. And also the music that he has written for the dance has no connection with the dance. The music and the dance are completely incompatible. They just occur at the same time, but they're not related to each other otherwise. Which is it's an extraordinary kind of commentary.
What does that say?
Well, it says that there's no connection between anything, and that to pretend that there is a connection is to violate the thing, because just because two things are happening at the same time doesn't mean that they're related. And this has a terrible effect of separating people, of course. Just the fact that it's also not true, because any two people that share their environment and place, time, share something. They're not just occurring at the same moment. They're actually related, as we all know.
Of course. And which, as we know, science has really gone on to prove that in many ways. The connection between everything.
Everything, yeah. And I think that to perceive it and to know it is it's a gift, and some people don't have that at all. And so they can't see it. It's hard to. It's like colors. If you're colorblind, you can't imagine what it means when somebody says those colors go together nicely or something. You can't imagine what that means. Well,
Cunningham was that's not a contemporary bit of choreography, is it? What he did with the drapes?
I think his company is still big news. I don't think anyone else represents the same degree of modernism that he represents.
I was just
Rauschenberg was his friend, and they were all with the idea of really Dada, continuation of Dada. And the thing about Dada was that it playfully asserted that life had no meaning, and that nothing had any meaning. Religion had no meaning. Thought, study, science, they were all just foolishness. Very, very ancient sense of the world not being real and not being important, and what you have to do is ignore the world. It's a very. It seemed playful, and it was playful in the sense that people played at it, but its meaning was complete nihilism, and it was. It began in Switzerland during the First World War. People who had simply gone there to escape the war.
Well, and that's something of the basis for existentialism. It's not really.
Yes, it is.
It's not really
the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Really. And it's always been a temptation to people. It's always been. I mean, there's always somebody, like in ancient China or in ancient Greece or Mesopotamia, who decides that the world is an illusion, and that if you pay attention to it, you're being fooled. And of course, the basis of Buddhism. So it's just simply a temptation that human beings face. I suppose in part because of the prodigality of the world, because it's so lush and so, of course it's hard for us not to feel that sitting here where we are. These green things and flowering things and growing to be as tall as people. I think it would be easier in the middle of the desert, of course, and most people that have thought that have gone to deserts, tried to obliterate the world that way.
Maybe that's what Christ's
40
days,
40
days in the desert.
Which is again, it's part of the experience of the divine. It has to be a wilderness journey.
Well, so dovetailing into what you wanted to talk about, the function of art seems to me to, in one aspect, be a reflection of the current climate.
Yes, that's true. It does. It's an illustration of what people believe. And I think the most serious misunderstanding of art that is current in our time and is very widely received and thought of as true is that, and this has been now for 100 years or more, that art is useless. And for many people, they still think that's true. They have had no reason to change their mind. And that's why they have so much trouble with getting it into schools or keeping it in schools. Once they get into schools, they think that it's flattering to art to say that it's useful, that it has its, and it comes down to that thing which people who know nothing about art say confidently, that look at that nice parade of cats along the fence. One is so black you can't see it. They say art is its own excuse for being. And that is an absolute, total lie. It has never been true of art. Art has always been the handmaid. And of course, throughout the history of art, it's been the handmaid of religion. There's no doubt about it.
What precipitated the notion that art is useless?
The development of aestheticism, a sense of that art is separate and is separate from moral life, separate from intellectual life. Actually, it is a pure aestheticism. It's the thing that Oscar Wilde represented. And it's the thing that people say, and now in my presence, if they say it, I jump all over them. But people say they want to make an art of life. They want their life to be their art. Well, this is a terrible idea. It destroys both art and life. So it's quite a villainous.
Why? How?
thing. Well, because the function of art is to illuminate life, and if life is thought as art, there's nothing to illuminate. There's nothing to. And that marvelous vulgar expression, "get a life," is very true, as most vulgar expressions are. And it is a condemnation of people who make an artificial life, that is an art life for themselves, and think of themselves as kind of writing their art biography, you know. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people do that, really. I mean, they really, truly do. Mm-hmm. So, but it's well, it has to do with what is the function of art. And if you think the function of art is to make an expression of what you feel and nothing else, then you can do this, because your life then can be an expression of what you value or think or feel, quite separate from anything else as a kind of theory. Now, everybody's life is an expression of what they feel and believe.
Regardless of...
no matter. I mean, so you're not really doing very much,
right.
You know.
Right.
Except you're trying to assume a life, really, rather than live it. And so it's a very, very bad idea to think of. Well, that's what it is.
And then we come back to that notion, for me, the solipsistic notion of contemporary society.
Yeah, that you don't really
need anything else.
You put yourself out there, and they like it, they don't like it, whatever. You know, it's the whole.
That I am the center.
I am it. You know. So, anyway, I think that I'm convinced that all people's idea of, in a sense, their interpretation of life is based on a belief in things which are invisible. And that what the artist has always done is make what is invisible visible. That is, it's an act of incarnation. It's an act of making something which is immaterial into something which is material. And this is a very, very difficult thing to do, because you can never really do it.
So it's an impossible task, really.
It's an impossible task, because the invisible does not fit into the visible. It's always got things left over. Mm-hmm. You cannot. It always has its own secret that you cannot get at. But it can be your aim, and it is, I think. You see, the aim of all. And the only value that artists have is that they can do this. So that you don't have to imagine the incarnation. They show it to you. Mm-hmm. And this is the reason, of course, that the artist has always been the handmaid of religion. Because every religion is based on the invisible. And the aim of the artist, whether he's a poet or a painter or a sculptor or a myth maker, is to make this thing, to incarnate this thing in words or in images or in sound or any way to incarnate this, to make this thing visible, which is invisible, mm-hmm. and therefore to provide the whole society with a kind of affirmation of the existence of the invisible, mm-hmm. which
even though it's an impossible, imperfect.
But it can lead you, and this is why two things: one, that the ubiquitous use of images, and the equally ubiquitous effort of some people to do away with these images because they say they are imperfect. Well, of course they are. But the question is, can they lead to something? And this, you see, constant with it, not just in Christianity, where there was a whole thing called the iconoclastic controversy, in which it was people decided in the first centuries of Christianity that to make an image was to confuse people, and this has to do somewhat with the Second Commandment. That the image can be worshipped instead of the thing that the image stands for. Mm-hmm. And this is really a forever undecidable question, because I think in part it depends on people's spiritual acuity, whether they can see this as they see, for instance, an image of the Virgin. Do they see this the same way that someone would see a mandala, something which is simply for you to contemplate, and through that contemplation to reach this invisible thing, and that's necessary. I mean, that the image is necessary, and the sacred image of, and no matter what it is, something which you sit and concentrate on as an act of prayer, actually is your only way. Partly because our minds are so jumpy. We move from one thing to another. It's hard for people to concentrate on anything, and without some help they can't do it. They either have to have something which they say over and over so that it loses its meaning, gains its meaning by being endlessly repeated, and I don't Kitty, huh? Aren't the cats or something else on there? Huh? I thought
it's beautiful.
The other day, that dogs are. It's possible to think of a police dog, but there's no other dog that you can think of, no other animal.
Yeah.
I mean, your picture of a police cat becomes a cartoon, somebody with a police hat on or something. But otherwise, or police horse,
Right.
there's nothing but a dog can be a policeman.
Police dog.
And some of them take their role very seriously.
Oh.
I think most of them take their role very seriously.
Yes, I think they do.
And Gideon's dog observes a law, which is that nothing on wheels should get by without being reminded that this is the wrong thing to do. So when he drives along the beach, all these people on skateboards.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, she's policing the entire area without any, of course, success. But she knows that's her job to point this out to them. If she can't stop them, she can at least alert them.
Remind
that they're on
them.
the wrong path. So, anyway, that's a digression, I think. But maybe not.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. But it is.
Maybe we can get the dogs to be the art police. I don't know.
I know it. I know. I think they could be trained to, because they do recognize things like realistic sculptures as they know that's a dog. And my dog knows what he looks like in the mirror. He likes to look at himself. I think that's a kind of art, you see, in which it affirms his existence, to see that that's what he is, I think this is kind of what the artist does. He makes so that he can make an image of the Virgin that can contain a whole lot of what that is: mercy and tenderness and beauty and power, all of these invisible things. If he's a very great artist, he can make this evident and literally make us therefore believe in this, believe in it, and you can see that she's one of the most beautiful. She's like you are, She's really a pewter cat. Or silver. I call her silver. It's an ancient and general pattern, which is a kind of tabby pattern. But I've never seen it so pure gray and white.
Yeah.
It's usually.
Well, obviously the function of art has several.
Yeah.
There's several.
But I think
functions.
this is its main function. This is its main function is that it makes things believable. Because it makes things visible. And we are the kind of creature that, though we know our eyes are deceptive, and we nonetheless have a remarkable faith in what we say. I saw it, and that is an affirmation of its existence. It's just an absolute substantiation of whatever it was that other people hadn't seen or that you'd seen.
It's making me think of just our own Virgin of Guadalupe on that tree at Pinto Lake.
Yes, exactly. I saw it, and that makes it. And other people come and they can see it too. That's a nice too. But even if you're the only one that saw it, it has a reality. It has an existence. It comes into the undeniable world, the world which we see. So it's a very persuasive thing. There's a wonderful joke that I've always enjoyed about that, which is somebody presumably says to somebody else, "Do you believe in baptism?" He says, "Sure, I've seen it." You see, it's such a marvelous.
Seeing is believing.
Yes, and man asking was not interested in whether it occurred or not, but whether it had any reality. And the other man just was yeah, why sure, I've seen it. You can't
What's
say
there not to
baptism.
believe?
Yeah, what's not to believe? You've seen these people standing in the river or having it's a wonderful undermining, you know. It's a kind of Zen
yeah.
undermining
Coeleen,
of the idea of seeing. And of seeing the invisible, certainly. So, but see, somebody has to do that. There has to be somebody who do it, and to make the invisible visible. Somebody has to do it.
But now, do you then make a distinction? Because we had talked about. That's the male, right?
Yeah.
This is the male.
Yeah. There's no female orange cat.
Really? They're all males?
Mm-hmm. They can be, but they don't have that pattern.
Uh-huh.
And there's no male, calico cat. Here's our sick hen. Come to join us.
This is a sick one?
She doesn't know she's sick, so she's a Christian Scientist. She pretends this is a normal condition.
This is just the way things are.
Have a crawl like this, hanging down. Oh dear.
Where am I going with this? We talked several times ago about all of us being makers.
Yes, that's true. We are.
But now if someone makes a dress,
Yeah.
if someone makes a cake,
Yeah.
do they have that same link
Oh yes.
to
It's satisfying.
to the invisible?
It's satisfying. Yeah. They're making every time they do. They're making the ideal cake or the ideal pie or the one that Mother used to make or whatever. But it's an invisible thing. They may have known it once, but it's not there now, and that's why they're making this one. You know?
So as such, it can still be said that art is the handmaid to religion.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Because people have to see the thing. They have to. They are not satisfied until it can be incarnated, when it can be made evident in the world. That's and that's why dreams are so unsatisfactory. You know, no matter how marvelous and elaborate and strange and seemingly significant they are, they don't. They're very difficult. It's almost right, I think, to say they're impossible to incarnate them. I think even the people who think that they're doing it, I know, well, of course, see, the terrible thing about trying to make these things visible in the world is that it's an impossible task, as you said, and it's therefore a whole lot of it. Well, it's like when you think of a picture or a cake or whatever that you want to make, that your vision of it and your expectation of it can never be met, really, totally. And you think, you see, that, well, this is what Mother did, and it'll be like that, but it won't be. For all kinds of reasons, I suppose, that everything is unique, for one thing. So, you can't expect it to be like something else, because it's not going to be.
So we continually exist in this sphere.
Yeah, and that's why people keep on doing it. You know, they think, well, next time it'll be it. and who. And what it takes is an enormously strong, powerful imagination that is able to perform this act of what it's essentially reducing the invisible to the visible. According to Jewish mysticism, there's a wonderfully, I think, illustration of this, which is that God had to contract himself in order to make room for making the world. He had to draw into it, fall back, in order to make the space.
I see.
And in other words, to make this visible. Give it room, actually.
Yeah.
And I think that's see, it's the opposite of people's idea that you make something out of the fullness of yourself. You don't. You make something out of the deliberate reduction of yourself, or submission of yourself to something which is greater than you are, or which needs the room to be. And anybody who makes anything which is really on a high order of difficulty, such as to make the image of God, or to make the vision of the end of the world, or anything like that, has to submit himself to the largeness of that by restricting himself. I always think that you see, everybody's always trying to do this, and I think of in the science classes when I was a young student, they always had these images of the atomic structures. You remember with ping pong balls on sticks, you know? Well, you see, that couldn't be farther from the real nature of the thing, but it's an attempt to make visible this thing which is invisible, and therefore to make it believable and understandable, acceptable, really. And it doesn't matter how grotesquely remote from what it is. I don't know whether they still even do that, you know. But I know they don't have any very good way of making visible the idea that everything is a wave of probability.
Yeah.
Now there is, it's going to take a giant imagination, visual imagination, to work out that, you know. And then of course the thing that you make visible is not the invisible. It's only an aspect of it, or at the most of satisfying sufficient image to enable you to imagine the rest of it yourself. And the thing that you see, the reason that people have always valued the artist, this idea that the artist wasn't valued, is perfect nonsense. He was always valued very highly. Doesn't mean that his name was valuable, or it just means that the thing that he does, that first of all, that all societies and all individual lives are based on a belief in something which is invisible. And whether it's God or money or whatever it is invisible. Or its visible manifestation, everyone knows, is not the important thing. And that's another great Zen story where the two monks were in the mountain retreat somewhere, and terribly cold. And one of the monks took the wooden image of Buddha and put it on the fire. And the other one said, "Oh, you mustn't burn the Buddha." And the first one said, "Is that the Buddha?" And see, that's the essence of what the artist does. You always know that his imagining is not the thing, but you know that it's either an aid to your own inert or incapable imagination. It's more than you could do. And everybody, and it's true right to this minute, you see, the person who embodies whatever it is that the society believes in and wants is well paid, always, and supported and recognized as good, but not necessarily beyond the other people that are doing the same thing. Now, I always give an example of that most of us, I think almost none of us, know who designed the refrigerator that's in our kitchen. But that refrigerator began as a drawing on a piece of paper by a person. And now it may be drawn by a computer, but the person is standing behind it, made the computer do this. And it didn't just come into existence without any thought or anything at all, or it didn't start as something that was made by a machine. It started in the mind of somebody. And of course, refrigerators, now anybody knows, they can say, "Oh, that's an old one," because of the design. Or they can say, "Oh, I never saw one like that, it must be new." We all recognize that this is an object of the incarnation of the imagination of somebody, of the ideal refrigerator. What does it look like? First, it has to look terribly clean. That's its main obligation, is to look absolutely clean and spotless. That wouldn't do even to have a polka dot refrigerator. You don't want any blurring of the concept of both clean and easy to keep clean. Those two things. The refrigerator has to embody that in its design as well as in its material. Or you'd never buy it, or you'd be some kind of eccentric that wanted a wooden one that looked like an outhouse or something. But, there's always room for those people. but for the business of refrigerators, that's not significant. And the other people who are making refrigerators know perfectly well. When they come to your kitchen, "Oh, that's Jim did that." Well, yeah, back in I think it was about 72. They know who did it. They know. They don't just know whether it's a Kenmore or something else. They know the person who did it. If they're in that business, and that was certainly the function of the artist when he was making images of the Virgin or saints or past events or whatever, things which were invisible. And the other artists would say, "That's a good job." And then also it had to be liked by somebody who was a patron. But the patron knew what he was doing. He knew that this was the best image maker that he could get, and that then it becomes something which is not a question of money. It's a question of can this be achieved? So.
But it poses such it's a paradox. It's definitely a paradox because the thing that is the thing is not the thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And yet I think that there are many people who insist on believing that the thing is the thing.
Yes, of course, and that's exactly why the Protestants took so against any images, because, and they had done that, over 1,000 years before in Byzantium. There was a thing called as I said, the iconoclastic controversy, in which people said there must not be any images in the church at all, because the images mislead us. That we think we're seeing the thing and we're not, which is perfectly true. But it may be the only thing that we can do is to see shadow of the thing, not the real thing.
Yeah.
And of course, that ties in with people's knowledge and learning and thought about the divine world over a long, long period of time. That the recognition that it cannot be shown, that if it is shown, it is you will die. Is in a lot of mythology, painting of Semele that I did that Zeus had loved under various disguises, and she kept saying, "I want to know what you really look like," and he said, "No, you don't." And, "Yes, I do." "No, you don't." So finally he said, "Okay," and he revealed himself to her, and she was burned to a crisp. And it says in the Bible, "No one shall see God and live." And those are wildly different ideas of God and different, or what seem to be, but they all contain the terrible power and the separation, the distance between the divine and the human, that can only be tolerated in a sense in disguise, not only when that's we're shielded from the reality by the disguises which it takes. So anyway, that's what the artist has to. He has to
grapple with.
He has to incarnate the vision, which he knows is not the real one, but in such a way that it enables people to reach the real one.
It's kind
if they're able.
It reminds me of Ouroboros.
Yes, it is. It is that the sense of the thing having a circle that's inescapable. So anyway, I think that when, not that people necessarily formulate this, but when they recognize that the reason that this person can be called an artist is because he's able to do this in a way that doesn't just satisfy him, but satisfies our need for the incarnation of the invisible, and we always have that, and it may be just in a simple something of what people think of as their dream of a house, or their dream of whatever. Now, the suburbs, you see, is one of the great incarnation of what was an absolutely invisible and powerful and maybe just sentimental idea that you could escape the very thing on which all civilizations are built, which is the city, and that you could have both the benefits of the city and yet none of the danger, so that you could be happily on this little. And you know that when the first really the effort to incarnate the idea of suburban, which really I think was after the First World War. Otherwise, you were just building things, but the concept of it, and one of the things which is kind of pathetic about it is that it had an idea. It had not a really very clear ideas of the aesthetic. And one of the ideas that they had, and that people still have, though it's absolute foolishness, is that if the streets aren't in a grid pattern, that then they are more interesting, or more. So they deliberately avoided a grid pattern of streets and made them wind, and that. You see, they had in their mind the joys of walking down a country lane, which winds between the trees and all this, but which is. It's really in conflict with the rest of the concept, and much of it, things that Sinclair Lewis made fun of in that extraordinary book Main Street, which I hope people still read.
They should still be reading it.
What?
They should still be reading it.
They certainly should. Yeah.
Should be required.
Nothing has changed in that. now.
The other thing that struck me for some reason as you're talking is, as you said, it's the persistence of imagination that's required, and it's promulgated by this incredible desire to make that which is invisible visible.
And it's only it really affects people who aren't doing it because they're paid, but just is that they so desperately believe in this thing, this invisible thing, that they have to make it visible. You know, they have to make it because they see it so clearly or so strong or whatever.
So could that, my generation, I think, has this notion that the artist must suffer. There must be anguish.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that isn't because of that need.
Yeah. Yes, well, I think so. Maybe, and if it is true, suffering, it's the suffering of knowing that what the difficulty or impossibility of what you are trying to do, which is true, but really, I don't think that the suffering is necessary for the making of something, unless you have some idea that is in opposition to what the general idea is. That something which is, say, the tradition suggests this, and that you feel goes the other way. And that only occurs every once in a while. When a tradition is strong, it supports the artist, and the people who disagree with it don't even go into it. I mean, it's for instance, one of the strongest traditions that ever was the tradition of art in Egypt, because it was tied to the religion, it was tied to the whole, as of course all arts are, all civilizations, but they had such a, and they knew that there were two ways to achieve changelessness or endurance. One of them is to make so many of something that some of them are bound to survive. I mean, you just make endless images of the same thing, and you can figure quite correctly that a number of them will survive. And another system is to make something so huge that it's bound. It simply is indestructible by being so. And that's exactly what they did with the pyramids. And they did it, in the around the year, say 2500 BC, and they lived to see that they did survive. I mean, they not only lived to see it, but they there were still Egyptians able to see it in Roman times. But everybody else did too. I mean, there was no question. And the extraordinary thing, you see, is that they built those pyramids. This is the real mystery of the pyramids. They built them so marvelously. They're made up of stones that tons, weigh tons each individual. But they're set without mortar so precisely that you can't put a knife between them, even now. And in all of the 2,000 now, it's 4,000 years since they were built, people have thought, let's use all that good stone for something that we want, because they're useless to us. And they've tried, and they've never been able to do anything about it. The only thing that they used to have, the pyramids used to have a smooth limestone surface. And that has been chipped off over these 4,000 years. But the stones, they can't do anything. And they want to. I mean, it's not that they revere them or, or think, they just think, gosh darn it, there are those stones. I could build the damnedest palace you ever saw, but I can't get them. There they are, perfectly visible, perfectly there, but absolutely indestructible. And of course, that's the basis of their whole dream, was to make what they knew the world to be, which is transient and fragile and constantly changing. They wanted to put a stop to that, and they did, and that's why they developed mummies. So the body deteriorates after you die. Not for us. We're not going to allow that to happen, because that's a change. The body shouldn't have to do that. And then when they build temples, you see, they build a temple like this, and then the next temple that they build would just be another one like that. They never put wings on it until the late times, until another culture. They just, just absolutely dead straight ahead and in
blinders on.
Just such a thing. And they made pillars in their temples that were as much as 20 feet in diameter. Now, that's a mighty big pillar. If you consider any place where you can look, you wouldn't have room for one here, anywhere around here. And what the result was, that the pillars became something not just supporting but forcing because they're so big, they made like a wall from any place that you stood, because they just were that big, so it was like a kind of solid wall. And there were the Greeks, the exact opposite, making a column from mathematical and visual principles that have never actually been able to be copied, because they combine the physical and the physical actuality, the substantial world, the body of the thing, with the way our eyes see things. And they took total account of that. I mean, it's just a mystery, and it's never been done before or after. Never. It's an absolutely, totally unique thing, the invention of a column, of a true column. Not just a support, you see, but of a true column, which is based on the two ways that we can see the world: the abstract mathematical understanding and the visual, what our eyes tell us is happening. Oh, it's that mystery that there's not one single straight line in the whole of the cosmos. Everything is curved. And nothing of the curve is revealed when you look at it. It's a very, you see, the thing is, sometimes I think that an idea as massive as the Egyptian and as subtle as the Greek are unique phenomena that can't ever be repeated. And nobody else ever had I suppose, the faith in durability that the Egyptians had.
The hubris.
What?
The faith, the hubris. They're just an amazing to me.
Yes, I know.
Sense of this is the way things are.
Yeah.
Despite what our eyes tell us.
Yeah.
I mean, especially the Egyptians.
Yeah, that's wonderful. A wonderful thing. Very good. Oh, well. But there.
And
no other person has ever really tried to make a column. They've made no end of supports and pillars and this and that and the other. But to make one that is like And then how they did it, because they're the pillars, the columns of the Parthenon are each one is different, and they're different spaces apart, and different emphasis and everything. But they were made up of drums of marble. This little circle drums of marble, and that were then pegged together. So they weren't cut out of one piece, right? And the different drums were made by different craftsmen, but they all knew what they were doing. And so they were just a matter then of bringing them and putting them together. Just a great, but of course again, it's so hard for us to get used to the uniqueness of the world. I think it's one of the very difficult things to it's the same old world. You think the same old things would happen, but they don't. Something like them happens, but it's never the same thing. It's true in our own lives.
Well, the uniqueness, the volatility, the ephemeral nature of everything.
Yeah. It's just hard to believe. Mm-hmm. And even when science tells us that there's no grain of sand which is like another, we can't get that in our mind. Mm-hmm. It looks pretty much like another one.
The same to me.
Yeah. You could fool me. And I guess the sands do fool us.
I think they do.
Not to mention every blade of grass, every feather on this chicken.
Mm-hmm. All different. All different. Well, it's almost as if it's just we don't have the mental capacity.
No, we don't.
We just have these little brains.
We do not. We cannot take in either uniqueness or vastness. I mean, infinity. We can't take those. We just can't do them.
Can't
and of course, all that science deals with now is what is the invisible. Mm-hmm. But there's no artist that's been able to make us believe in it. Those ping pong balls are not it.
Oh gosh.
How's Madam, huh?
She's just very slowly hanging around. Just hanging around.
She does that kind of burping, you know.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure. I don't know whether it's pain. Doesn't seem to be pain.
Well, that's probably a good for today.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Shoes are much more. I think shoes are the most powerful garment. You know, a lot of people are attracted to shoes and have closets full of shoes. Very few people collect gloves or overcoats or sweaters or even handbags, which are really pretty fascinating too. You know, shoes seem to be. I really don't have an answer, but I know it's true.
Yeah.
Even museums. A lot of museums will have, you know, not even costume museums, but just like the De Young has a shoe collection. And they do have some hats and some handbags, but they have a shoe collection. And that's just a different, they just are more connected to people somehow.
I keep thinking about Imelda Marcos, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah.
And all of her search for power, I'm sure, growing up probably very poor, and then amassing incredible collection. Probably a large share of her power.
Yeah, I think that too. And I think it's interesting, that expression about barefoot and pregnant. You know, and I think that that's kind of the Imelda Marcos syndrome, where shoes are, they can represent money because poor people can't have them, and they can also represent independence. Because if you have a good pair of shoes, you can put them on and leave, you know? So there's a real independent thing. So they're just loaded. They're very, I mean, we could talk about shoes forever. They're very interesting. So it is interesting that I've chosen not to make them right now. But that's kind of the theme, that I'm not so sure that we're in control of what we make. You know, I'm not so sure. It's not so much a head thing, like, well, I'm not going to make shoes anymore. It kind of comes more from the inside, like, ooh, I can't make shoes right now. You know, I don't feel that I'm very much in control over what I make. I have to kind of wait to see what's coming up. I mean, I really have no idea.
That's the beauty and the terror of it.
Yeah. Like with Ruby Washington, the tall box, I got that. It was an old knitting machine box. And I bought it there was this crazy junk store next to Shoppers Corner for a while. It was closed down by the fire department. Oh my God, it was wacko. And I got it there, and I had it for months. I had it over 6 months sitting in my studio, and I began to plan what I would do in it. Well, I was going to do something about the Mid-South Fair, where we'd go see freak shows, and they had those mirrors that, you know, and all that. And I had all these different plans for it, and then one morning I came in my studio, and I just saw her in there, and I drew a sketch. I thought, well, I don't think you could make a human that narrow and that tall that would look right. So I did a little scale drawing. I was like, yeah, that's great. You know, and so it just came up. And the 3 suitcase pieces, I feel like the information came to me from the suitcase. And like installation. You know, you get some great old building and you're supposed to do some installation. You just visit it for a while and you start getting stuff, messages from it. I mean, it sounds kind of weird, but it's true. You know, there's stuff, used things do have a life, and they do call up. And it might call up something different for you. If we had identical suitcases, you might have come up with something else, but that's what I came up with.
Am I getting this? Is it working? Well, and not to belabor the shoes too much, because I don't want to, but they are a very important part of who you are. Mm-hmm. And just in noticing the kind of evolution of them, they start to become, well, more like autobiographical pieces. You start to incorporate more things into them, especially the house with that little house. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought the house and my mom's piece could easily go into this room. Mm-hmm. And so did Kathleen. It was like, oh yeah, those are really crossing. Yeah. Hi, Chuck. Good.
You back? No.
Back.
Hi, Julia.
Hi, Chuck.
Got a big hunk of it from over like 20 years that you'll see those kind of pieces popping up. Ooh, there's a direction. And maybe I didn't take that direction until a few years later.
Yeah. But it was really with the advent of the fellowship.
Mm-hmm. But see, I was done anyway. Mm-hmm. You know, I was really not. I had turned away from the shoes anyway and started other pieces. Mm-hmm. And the fellowship provided me the time to do it, but I had already started. Like I started this piece, had October's in '83, right after my shoe show in LA.
So when you applied for the fellowship, you applied for
the shoes. So that was pretty scary too. I was like, oh God, they gave me all this money for shoes. But then friends are always encouraging me. Said, no, they gave you money, to do what you need to do, and they gave it to you because of what you've done in the past. But there's no strings attached, So you have to do that. So. A little permission, I know. That's what they're for, isn't it? To give you permission to
Yeah, it's not good at doing it for others. Mm-hmm. Not as good as doing it for ourselves. So tell me about the two books, the accordion books, because they're very different.
Yeah, well, this was in '92, and this was a culmination of a lot of information that I had collected, over 15 years of doing shoes. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't head out to do research for this book. These were just like little articles people had sent me and things I had found. Mm-hmm. But then I was at the Essex Institute in Salem, Massachusetts, and I found I said when I travel, I go to the basement of all these museums, and they kind of gave me free rein, and I started pulling out drawers, and I found this pair of Japanese shoes that were like this high. And I said, who wore these? And they pulled out the little card, and it said a special courtesan, special high-ranking courtesan when prostitution was legal. And that was the book, because it was like another example of very high shoes, very uncomfortable, and being somehow mixed up with sex. Mm-hmm. I know prostitution was looked upon differently, but it was sex. Mm-hmm. And so then I did specific research on that shoe, and I found this book that a person, when was he there? Before they even opened the borders in the mid-1800s is when they opened Japan. Before that, this man was there writing, and he was writing about the ceremony and was putting this very highest ranking courtesans on these giant, and not just the shoes, the kimono, everything was enlarged, and she would parade down the street towering above people. It was kind of like advertising. Mm-hmm. And then just the whole book fell into place, and I had been, I have a lot of books about shoes, and I just chose these 5 women to tell their stories. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then I found this amazing quote by Rita Mae Brown to finish it. It starts with quotes by Marilyn Monroe and Simone de Beauvoir. And then Rita Mae, she's too perfect. And then I could give her running shoes.
Go, Marilyn, go.
Yeah. So that is why that book came about, because the information was all there, a part of me. And I've always been interested in making books. And I just thought, what would happen if you took any everyday red stiletto and opened it, and it could tell you its story. And that's the connotation. That's where those connotations come from, is all this historical baggage that's going around. And then the other book, which I'm hoping to do an edition of 100 and bind them like a real book. Uh-huh. And I've really done an accordion because it's so good for museums.
Right.
Books are really hard to show.
Yeah.
So this is in this form for show. Mm-hmm. And it's basically the same story that the head Dr. Who's tells about my best friend. Mm-hmm. But my best friend's name was Kitty, and that's the name that Anne Frank used for her diary.
That's right.
And so I thought, in that piece I wasn't able to use it, and I just thought it was so amazing that my best friend's name was Kitty. And I thought if I did it in book form, I could talk more. I could make more text and make it talking. And then I've been learning to draw, and I've been trying to learn to draw by drawing. And so that came up too. It's like, I could draw pictures. And I based them a lot on childhood photos, snapshots, and did a lot of changing of composition and stuff, but wanting it to look like a children's book when I was a kid. And I'm going to do 5 of these. I have enough of this great old velvet to do 5. And then I'm hoping I can sell a few of them and use that money to do an edition. And the dimension is based on her diary. And this little lock is a copy of the lock on her diary. Her diary was plaid, and I looked everywhere for the right plaid, and I couldn't find. I even looked at junk store shirts, and just everything. And then I found this old piece of velvet in my boxes of, junk, and it was just really nice. And then it kind of turned it into my diary too, instead of a copy, because it's really my memory. It's not Anne Frank's memory at all. It's how I intersected with World War II.
But you said the lock is...
The lock is a copy, of the... If you ever see a photo of Anne Frank's diary, this is exactly like the lock on her diary. So when I do the bound edition, I'm going to have to figure out how to do a pop-up, because I really like that, where we're stepping through the drawing into reality. What's represented in my book as reality was the fantasy as children, and what's represented as this real childhood fantasy was the reality. Twist.
Yeah, how those two intersect.
Yeah.
But that's Anne Frank's.
That's her room.
Yeah.
They reconstructed it. I mean, that's the actual room, but they put furniture and stuff in and photographed it. But if you go visit the Anne Frank house now, I understand it's completely bare, except for the photos that she put up on the wall. We went to the Holocaust Museum when we were in Washington. We had to do that.
I haven't been there yet. My partner has. Especially by the tile shoots.
Yeah, that was just amazing.
So why other than obvious reasons, why the affinity with Anne Frank?
Really, probably because of my age. I think that a lot of girls that were, Anne Frank's diary was published in English in 1952, and so that would have made me 8. So it's just at that age where I could actually take books and read them on my own. And I think that a lot of people that age really, it was the first, in a way, it was one of the first books you could read on your own. It was a girl protagonist, which was not that common. No. In the 50s, unfortunately.
And Nancy Drew, I think she was the only one.
Yeah. And there are a lot of people who have a real affinity to Nancy Drew. I have a friend who still writes murder mysteries for lesbian Nancy Drew. That's her trip, So, and then I think because I was Jewish, that made a stronger pull. But my best friend was Catholic, and she had the same, pull to her. I think it was timing. Mostly.
It's interesting because I know I had the pull too. I used to think I was Anne Frank reincarnated.
Really?
So, yeah.
Yeah. And other people I've talked to have said that. Some people said, oh, I played Anne Frank too, but their game was different. Yeah. And some people have said, oh, I played her in the high school play, and I was completely attached.
Yeah. It's just, I think a lot of it was the time period. It's definitely following on the heels. Of World War II fairly closely.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to remember how close, but 52, there were people still in camps waiting to get, took years. And these are really play on, I think that I do series, but I don't do them like, okay, now I'm going to do a series and do 5 things. Like my Shoes for the Little Woman series. I did the first one in 86 and the last one in 92. I just do a little and then I do other things. And I think that this is the beginning of a series, but I couldn't promise. And it's about how children see language and how adults may say something like, I'm standing on my ear to make you girls happy, which is what this says. And as children, we're visualizing my mother standing on her ear, or fit a word in edgewise. That just kind of funny thing. And I remember I have a son that's now a grown up, but he used to say, I'd say, he would come and talk and say, okay, take off now, and he'd go, like, right. He's not an adult. He sees it rather than hears it. Right. So that's what these are about. And they're carved mirrors. And it's the same with these little guys over here, these gray pictures. What we're looking at is the back of the mirror. So you see the gray paint, and then when you scrape through, you usually see copper first, and then silver, and then clear glass. And so I'm just using that technique to create text and this kind of feeling of memory where you're looking kind of through a fog, and then a little room behind it.
Such a nice effect.
Yeah, I did a mirror just for myself when I first started doing shoes, and I wanted to do something about now. And so I took this great old mirror and I carved on the back of it. It had gotten to the point when she looked in the mirror, all she could see were the wrinkles. And when I was doing that carving, to be looked at from the front, I saw the copper. I thought, this is interesting. And it just made me think, this is the most interesting side of this mirror. And that's what kind of brought up these pieces where it's just fascinating. And these little family photo albums are just studying snapshots and cropping them so that they kind of have a theme. So that's like, me and my cowgirl outfit. It was a Packard. What year was that Packard? This one like an 1849 Packard or something. This is my grandmother's 1935 Chevy. And my sister going off to a trip to visit in the country. And this is my girlfriend, and I don't know what that is. Maybe a Pontiac or something.
Is that Kitty?
Yeah. But this feeling of the car becoming a member of the family, because you look through your family photo and you go, oh yeah, I remember that car. And it's like,
they really were.
Yeah, really. And this one is called Touch, and it's more about my dad touching me. And I just cropped the pictures down to show his hand on me, because we weren't a very physical family. We were hugging. And usually, when he posed for a picture, he'd go. And then he would step away. And after his death, I was just thinking about his beautiful hands that we just didn't touch very much. So that's it's about. And here it uses this
bittersweet piece, isn't it?
That you can see the reflection of this piece in.
Oh yeah.
And it's just a great process doing it. You can actually see where I've gone all the way through. You can see the light come through. So it's kind of an etching woodblock print combo.
It's really nice. Really nice. And the playing cards were all in your father's collection.
Yeah. and there's more at home.
Yeah, it's going to take thousands.
I think I have about 6,000 cards, and I figured
collected
he just never threw anything away.
Yeah.
Neither of them did, which is why I had my skate key, and I had every report card, and my Anne Frank, my copy of Anne Frank, I have at home. Just all this wonderful museum of my life. My sister, thank God I had a sister. We went together and had to clear out the house.
This is after your dad?
Dad died in 93, and it was an archaeological dig. And I wish that I had videoed even one closet, because there was this hallway closet, and what was so funny was the combination of stuff. Like, here was his, in this one closet was the most recent thing we found were like where he was sticking his mortgage payment things up on the shelf, and then on the bottom there was cloth, a box of cloth. My sister and I said, "What is this?" Oh my God, these are the curtains we had when we were in the 2nd grade. And then under that, we found this fabulous catalog. I just saw it at my sister's house of all black musicians that she had gone to in the South, and it must have been like 1956. And Chubby Checker was in it, and just these, people who went on to become great stars. And it was like Memphis, Tennessee. It was called a review, rock and roll review, or rhythm and blues review. And that was in the closet. Yeah. So it was like, and in the kitchen there would be like our baby cups in amongst the dishes. It's just amazing. It was just amazing. It wasn't even layered.
Was it all put away very carefully?
No, it was just kind of like, could have been used that day.
I'm talking about the curtains from your room when you were in 2nd grade.
No, they were just in a bag. They were just in a cardboard box, like they'd been moved a few times and never gone through.
They just kept everything.
They just kept everything.
Was your mother still alive at that point?
No, she died in 83.
That's right.
So, and we didn't do much when she died. She was a weaver, and we had to take her weaving equipment and find homes for it and make her weaving studio kind of into an office for my dad. And so we didn't do a lot of shuffling around of stuff. And then he died, and we closed the house up for a couple of months, and then we went back with 1 week to do it. It was insane. We should have taken longer, but we didn't have time. And we decided that the best thing to do would be to ship too much rather than regret anything. So we shipped huge amounts of, we're still opening boxes and going, what? But so back to the playing cards, we just started finding playing cards. We'd open a drawer and we'd go, oh, look, here are report cards. Oh, look, here's photos. More playing cards. And I started throwing them all in one box. And when there got to be like 60 or 70 decks, I said, oh, I'm taking this. Because I was real attuned to, there are going to be things here I'm going to use for materials. And there were over 100 decks. And since I didn't throw anything away, you can go look, you can see like things that look very 50s, 60s, 70s, all the way up, and airlines that are no longer in business. And
so, why
her?
Fortuna?
She was the first piece that I made on my NEA, and she's a self-portrait. And I think just talking about reflection and chance, and like we were talking about, why did we identify with Anne Frank? Because of our time, and how much of that is due to chance, and where does chance come in with legacy? And I just thought it was interesting that one of my father's legacies to me was 100 decks of cards, which is all about chance. And I just find that fascinating. I'm not through with that topic of how legacy and chance are one and the same.
How and if they are really.
And I found that wheel at Mr. Goody's, And I saw it like one Thanksgiving, and then didn't buy it. I thought, boy, some artist should have this wheel. This is just great. But I didn't think it was for me. And then I woke up Christmas morning and thought of her. She was in my mind, and making her and using the wheel and the cards. And so I had to wait till the next day. I called Mr. Goodies, yeah. Like, how could they be closed on Christmas Day? This is insane. The next day I called him. He said, oh yeah, it's still here.
Now, what did your dad do?
He was
Your mother was a weaver.
My dad was in management in the meat business. So he was like the comptroller of the largest meat packing plant in the South, King Cotton.
King Cotton.
King Cotton Franks.
He was a comptroller for them?
Yeah. And his father had been a shoemaker. I think it's interesting. How are you going to exit all this?
I always do. It's great. It's just like a huge puzzle where you get it together. But I'm just wondering how, here you are, you're in the South, you're Jewish, your mother's a weaver, your dad's is comptroller. How did you decide that you wanted to make shoes? Did you do that right away?
No, because they wanted me, of course, to go to college. So they sent me to college, and I majored in psychology. And I dropped out after my third year to the 60s. and I dropped out to go live off the land up in Dos Rios in north of San Francisco. And ended up marrying this. I don't think I should describe him. I don't want to see it in print. I married an alternative type fellow, shall we say.
Say no more.
And life got complicated after that. It was the 60s. And I had a sandal shop in Mendocino in 68. So I made sandals, and I'd always made things. And I had always made things. And my mother had always encouraged it. And it was just a big part of being me as a child, was making stuff and finding a little piece of material I loved and having my mom and draft patterns so that we could make a vest or something, just taking little small valuable things and working them into clothing, because she was a seamstress as well. And then when I moved to Boston, I opened a sandal shop because that's what I knew how to do. And the man that I rented space from a shoe repair person, and he was an old Italian shoemaker. So I started learning a little bit, and then I got to study with a guy from Williamsburg. And really, we made our own thread, and we made our wood pegs, and so it was a real classical education in shoemaking.
This is in the 70s?
Yeah, I studied in 76 with the shoemaker. And that was so great because everything I was interested in could be focused on shoes for quite a while. Until around 1993, and all of a sudden it wasn't working.
20 years, yeah.
So, in the beginning I was making felt, and I was making felt shoes, and I wanted to do batik, and I could make boots, and any kind of fiber thing that I was interested in doing, I could just work it into shoes, piece quilting. I could make boots. So it was just as a crafts person, it was just a great focus for all the things I wanted to experiment with. And then when I started doing sculptural, not functional stuff, it was the same thing. It's like I wanted to, I was in kind of the wave of feminist art and making those kind of statements, make it on a shoe. Talking about greed and power, make it on a shoe. Just the ideas were also, I could focus on shoes. It was really interesting. Just up to a point, and then it was just didn't seem real anymore.
Move on.
Mm-hmm.
So did you come out to California to go to school?
Oh, I was at school, Antioch College in Yellow Springs, and I was on a co-op job. That's how I met the guy that I married and ended up in California and dropped out. Like 60.
And then you moved to Boston when you were no longer married.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
In the 70s. Yeah.
And that's when you met Dennis, too. And then you moved out here?
Yeah, it's true. I met Dennis in 76. We spent 2 years in Maine before we moved here. And we've been here since 79.
And what brought you here?
Dennis. He had lived here in the early 70s, and he had studied Taekwondo with Master Song, and he wanted to come. Huh?
I did too.
Did you? In the 70s?
No, in the 80s.
Was Master Song? Wow, are you still doing it? He's not either, but he's doing Aikido.
Yeah.
Have you ever done it?
Yeah, I took Aikido for a while after I dropped out of songs. I just felt like he was very sexist. And I just had
it's
enough
too
of it
bad.
after a while.
Den, he did work and get his black belt, but he just lost so much heart with it. He just felt like this is not what martial arts should be. This is awful, and Song was just a trip. And then he found Aikido, and now he's a black belt in Aikido, and I do Aikido too. Do it North Bay Aikido. Nancy Guerrero, yes, we just visited her in Washington.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Oh, has she moved out there?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
She, did you ever know Greg Mock? He taught it. They moved out together to Washington, and then they split apart. So they're not together anymore, but she has an apartment. I think it's in Silver Spring, Maryland. If you ever really wanted to write her, I can give you an address. And she has a job that's very challenging and wonderful. You know, she works with mentally ill people. And she's a manager, a program manager for a home that takes people out of institutions, kind of a halfway house. And it's been really challenging for her. We had dinner with her 2 nights, but she's so good at what she does. And so she's really up for the challenge. And she's studying with Satomi Sensei, this big Aikido big his dojo in Washington. And that's challenging too. But she is so great in Aikido. Yeah, she's one of my teachers.
The last time I saw her, it must have been quite a while ago. It's funny how fast time goes by when you get older. But she had been working with her mother.
Oh yeah, she did that not too long.
Yeah.
And then Greg got a job in Washington, and she thought, there's nothing happening for me in Santa Cruz. I'm going to go too. And now they're separated, but she said she kind of felt like Greg was a catalyst to get her out of here and to get her to a whole different place. And she's just doing really well. She's really happy. Yeah. So that's what brought us here with Master Song. And then, I was ready to move anyway. There's nothing funny.
So you actually moved out here because Song Studio is here?
Because Dennis had this vision that he really wanted to study and get his background from Master Song. He did, and he got discouraged. And so now he's done the same thing in Aikido, and he's brought me into Aikido, and I'm very pleased. Well, I will write Nancy and tell her that I saw you.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I do. It's always a lot of fun. I just felt like I had a thing of it. So I was doing Taekwondo, just before she got married to Randy.
Wow. Another thing about having a show in your hometown, it's cool. There's always a
connections. Yeah. I think I probably have, not for now, but I can call you
Yeah.
with any questions once I start getting into it. When would I call you?
Yeah, I think other than, I'm booked tomorrow. Actually,
Well, I probably am not going to be able to start working on it until Friday afternoon in actuality. And possibly the weekends, probably when I'll be original.
Okay, I'll be around.
Okay. Leave a message.
Yeah, and I can call you
You can call me
back.
back.
Yeah, I'll be training.